fact that the political system does not speak to realities on ground level to such an extent that if a different party or a different president were to take over, we must not be so naive as to think that that would suddenly imply that these problems would go away. The country would still suffer from extreme levels of unemployment, from a high demand for socialist policies, from high levels of crime, from intercommunal conflict or friction, and from the fact that the country is inhabited by a variety of communities who have different perspectives of history, different cultures, different narratives, different philosophical outlooks, and very importantly, different views on constitutionalism. In other words, different views on what the state ought to be and what the state ought to do, which means that these different communities naturally interpret the text of the Constitution in fundamentally different ways. These realities will not go away. That does not mean that it is not important to get rid of the ANC. Of course we should get rid of the ANC because the ANC has made things significantly worse. But we must also bear in mind that replacing the ANC with another party would not simply imply that these things would go away. The only real, tangible solution is an alternative political system, one that is decentralized and one that facilitates much higher levels of autonomy. And so it is good news if the DA is gaining ground at the expense of the ANC. It is good news if other opposition parties are also gaining ground. And it is good news if parties like the ANC, like the MK party, and like the Economic Freedom Fighters are losing support. But at the end of the day, we ought to recognize that if one of these alternative parties were to take over, these problems would not go away. And in fact, that an alternative approach to governing the country might lead to new forms of friction, riots, and so forth. This is not an attempt to be overly pessimistic, but it is an attempt to bring some realism to the conversation and to say that if we truly want a sustainable solution in this country, we need to move towards a system that facilitates autonomy and self-governance. And so if we were to measure a party, it should not merely be by the extent to which they are gaining support at the expense of the ANC, but by the extent to which this party is willing to play a supportive role in the process to facilitate tangible long-term solutions, which necessarily implies thinking outside of the box, thinking creatively about macro political solutions. Now we should